We have incredible options today, and I love that. The mainstream media hates it, but you, me, we have options on things we watch, things we can listen to. And while I love the first, I'm a fan of others too, big fan. Daily Wire does incredible stuff. The Blaze, I just love The Blaze. I'm so impressed by the things they do at The Blaze. And in fact, I want to talk to Matthew Peterson about that. He is the editor-in-chief of The Blaze. Matthew, you guys have something kind of big going on right now, and it looks freaking cool. The man in me is already in love with it, but I'm going to hand it to you. I'll let you make the pitch for it.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, we're in this unique environment right now where everyone's realizing what a lot of us have said for years, which is that there's really no value left anymore in mainstream media. On the other hand, as good as these new outfits are, like what you're doing, like what Daily Wire is doing, like what we're doing, look, what we're doing is good because it's new and we're trying to do something different, not because we're doing the same thing the right has done, which has generally sucked for a long time, as we all know. So I don't know how many times, I'm just so excited to be part of this. I'm lucky. I don't know how many times I've talked to people over the last 20 years really about creating a conservative, a right-leaning or just non-Borg magazine and that just did all the things, that had profiles, talked about not politics, but like life, what's going on out there, right? Interesting, descriptive stuff that's not just someone pontificating, no op-eds, no white papers, right? But just really interesting content that grabs you in a beautiful format. And so we created Frontier. And, after the election, we're all living in a new frontier. I couldn't be pleased that we started before then. And this is the kind of thing that you can pick up and read. And, I did an interview with Glenn Beck in this, for instance, and not Glenn Beck, the media figure, but Glenn Beck, the guy who spends a lot of time saving American artifacts, right? And is very concerned with American history and what he does with that. Matt Taibbi wrote for us about what it was like to walk into Elon's, office and go into the Twitter offices and create the Twitter files with Barry Weiss and Michael Schellenberger. You have reviews of whiskey, restaurants, the kind of normal stuff that just represents a holistic vision of media. And so, this is a work in progress, but 0 to 1, we got this out of the bag, and I think it hits the mark. And I think if you check it out, you'll agree.
Yeah, I haven't gotten my hands on a physical copy of one yet, and I'm going to freaking nerd out on it. I like it. I'm a magazine guy, Matthew. Maybe I'm an old school guy. I'm a magazine guy. I dig it. I'm totally in on it. Anyway.
They're coming back.
All right, so what's that?
They're coming back. People want the physical thing again.
Yeah. They are, physical books are coming back too. I don't know why we're going off on this, but now that we're on it, I'm on it too. I used to be, and I still am when I travel, a Kindle guy, right? Because you have all your stuff right there. But me and my sons, my boys are 15 and 16. My sons prefer physical books now. I don't know what that is. Maybe there's something caveman in all of us. I don't know what that is, but I like having a physical copy of something.
Yeah, I think there's a snapback or a correction to go back, not to get rid of everything digital, but to grab onto things that are meaningful and physical. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the rise of the independent media, and more specifically, let's talk about the rejection of the mainstream media, because it was this last election, honestly, as much as anything, it was a rejection of the media that told everybody Trump's Hitler forever, over and over and over again, and then he goes out and wins the popular vote. What that is the American people saying, we don't believe you anymore. But what was it? And I know it was a series of things over a long period of time, but if you had to point to one or two things that were the thing where the American people finally were all, I'm not listening anymore, what was it?
So I would actually go back to the start, because I think we can talk about the end, but I think the beginning, right, is when they really dug themselves a hole. I would go right back to the Russian collusion narrative from the very beginning, because they grabbed onto that and did not let go. That was the first big thing. Of course, they've been lying about stuff for decades. When it came for Trump, something was different. And they grabbed on to this lie that came from the government and major institutions and Obama and friends on the way out. And they did not let go. And I remember thinking at the time, it's almost as if they have this spear and they're coming to, just spear Trump with it. And he grabs it and they won't let go of it. So he uses the fact they won't let go of it to turn it around and drive it through them. And he's done this repeatedly. This has happened to them repeatedly. They grabbed onto collusion. They wouldn't let it go. They were unrepentant. And then when you go through COVID, of course, that's an enormous one that still people are bleeding off of that one, where they spout a bunch of ridiculous stuff for political reasons, won't let go. People's lives are impacted. I don't think there was a tipping point of these things. I think it started with them just going in 100% way, no backsies, no back down against Trump. And those compounded over time. And then I think what actually popped the balloon, Jesse, was when you saw what happened to the guy on that fateful day this summer, right? When people just saw the visuals of the assassination attempt and him stand up and what his initial response was. And there was something visceral about that moment that just stuck with people. They saw this media lying to them over time, or they started to become more unsure of it. And then you see the guy and what he did in a world historical moment that can't be faked. And I think it was over at that point.
Matthew, when we talk about how the media won't back off, like you just mentioned, how they don't back off, they just keep going. If something's false, they keep going. The lack of humility I find fascinating, and obviously I'm not going to pretend like I'm a humble person. Nobody watching thinks that at all, so I'm not going to act like I'm some fount of humility here. But I've had several things that I've screwed up in my life and periods of my life that I've bottomed out, and they've been my fault, and I've been able to look at myself in the mirror and say, man, that's on you. You gotta get it cleaned up. You're drinking too much. You're not working out. You're doing these things. No one in the media can do that. Nobody in the media can look in the mirror and say, hey, maybe the lie is without end. Maybe we should back off. That no one can?
No, you're right. They can't, because the rest of us can look in the mirror and self-reflect. And these people, maybe some of them as individuals can, but it's because their job, right? Their job is not to tell the truth. You know how I knew that Biden was going to have to step aside? Because the New York Times came out and said so, not because the New York Times is so powerful, but because they would never speak truth to actual power. They would never get out in front of power. That's not their job. Their job is to be the mouthpiece for power. So you knew when they came out and said Biden should step down, it wasn't a brave stand. There was a powerful force that was behind this, and they were the mouthpiece of it. So they're mouthpieces. They're like PR. They're like salesmen. They're paid to go out and say what they're going to say, and it's degrading to the human person. Tucker talks about this. He's right. To actually have to do this every day and get paid to lie is just a disgraceful thing. And I'm sure some of these people are like tortured. Some of them are beyond, they don't even care anymore. But it's not their job, right, to be humble, because they're not wrong. They're, in their mind, their job is to go out and say what they're supposed to say. And at this point, it's so obvious, right? It's bad PR. It's bad sales. And that's why it's not working.
Matthew, I want to go back to something you were talking about Glenn Beck and his preservation of history. It's funny, the last time I actually sat down with Glenn, he had to pause our interview for a couple minutes because he was doing exactly that. It was a painting, something to do with Washington. I forget exactly what it was, but he was emphatic that he had to buy this to save it. And you actually recently sat down with him and talked about how the people who write history don't always do so accurately. Talk about that.
Yeah, so just first off, in case anyone's been living under a rock, right? They need to realize that this is what we've done in our schools for a long time. We have sold a version of history in which we lie about ourselves. It's one of the most bizarre things you can imagine in human civilization, but we've lied about ourselves, saying that we are bad, we are intrinsically evil in some way as a nation. We've done that systematically. Howard Zinn's history books, his commie history books, were selling like hotcakes decades ago, and that influenced the entire nation. So what you have now is, precisely what we've seen the last couple of years. This comes to fruition where people actually want to rip down physical manifestations of American history and heroes. They want to take statues down and melt them down and destroy the physical remnants of our actual history. And I think what Glenn recognizes and really has pointed out to me in ways that I've really learned from is just how story is so important, right, to memory and to describe who you are now in the present. And the story in history comes from actual physical artifacts, right? The actual copy of the Federalist Papers you can touch, or George Washington's compass, which he has at the museum. And what they want to do is get rid of that, so they really put it in the memory hole. And he tells a story about one of the bells of the Santa Maria, and at an auction, a guy tries to buy it, and the seller he wins the auction, and he tries to actually take possession of the bell. And the guy selling it says, "What are you doing with this?" He said, "Oh, I'm going to melt it down because it represents colonialism, and I'm going to melt it down and put him in some postmodern, architecture." And the guy refused to sell it to him. I mean, they're going back to erase it. So saving it, right, means saving actual physical things, representations of the past that tell our story. And I think this is a really noble thing that Glenn is doing here that more people should know about.
Yeah, I do too. I should note, I don't want to brag, I've actually held that compass. I stood right there with Glenn and I held George Washington's compass, and it was sick. It's one of the coolest things ever. All right, Matthew, one more time. I want you to tell us, Frontier Magazine, how do I get my hands on it?
You want to go to theblaze.com/frontier, theblaze/frontier. If you get there, you're going to find a few articles are free, but most of them won't be released to the public. It's a print only sort of thing. If you're a subscriber, you can also see it on digital, but we're not releasing all those articles to everyone. This is this very special, thick quarterly that you can put on your coffee table, and everyone will know that you and it are awesome.
Oh, I dig it. I'm so in. Matthew, thank you, brother. I appreciate you. All right, we have final thoughts next. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.